Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, February 13th. We are just starting out here in week three, where our focus will now shift more towards the technology and how your music starts working and interacting in the game. You've just finished out the second composition and sound design for our second game application, which is called Angry Bots. And that took a new and different approach to how the music was built and set up for the game. And I have a couple of submissions here to which we will start out this afternoon taking a listen to. After we discuss your submissions here, then we will also discuss the new assignments for week three. Our focus moves towards implementing your music and sound effects in the game. We are going to be using an application called Wise from Audio Kinetic, and it is a free application that is available online. You might already have a version of it installed from last month, but I wanted to go over and just kind of show how you might get access to this application. So you are going to visit the company website, and you are going to download an application called the Wise Launcher. And you can go to audiokinetic.com. Nope. Maybe if I spell it correctly here. audiokinetic.com. And you can download the Wise application. You will download an application called the Wise Launcher. And when you install it on your computer, looks like this. Looks like this. Oh, I don't need the new version. And you are going to go to the Wise tab and download a specific version. Hold on, let's get this here. And you will see this where it says install new version. We are using a version of 2016 for all of our game projects, so you can just go ahead and download the last or most recent version of 2016, which at this time is 2016.2.6.6153. And you can install that. You can just use the default installation settings. You don't need to install any of the extra material that comes with it. And you will know that this is correctly installed when you launch the application and it states the correct version. Let's see here. Let me take a moment for mine to load up here. I launched it from Spotlight, but inside of the application you can just click Launch Wise, and we'll launch the application for you. There it goes. And you will see the correct version. You want to make sure you have a version of 2016 stated there at the top. And then you know that you have all of the correct materials needed for this week's assignments. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. All of the assignments and a couple of the class materials state that you need to use WISE. So I just wanted to go through and make sure that that was made available to you. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about our submissions here for Angry Bots. We have 3 submissions to take a listen to. And actually, let me clarify my track names. Ambient, this is going to be Buzzer Action. This is Mac Action. Spider Action. These are stingers. All right, that should work. So you can see the markers up the top here. If you've submitted, you know which one is yours. And we're going to take a listen to these 3, and I'm going to play the part of the computer, mixing these different levels up and down. So we have... Come on, 100. Oh, moving slowly. We have an ambient cue, a buzzer action cue, a Mac action cue, and a spider action cue. And then we have the 3 stingers down here. And I'm just going to bring the faders up and down one by one to introduce each new layer. And I'm probably going to listen to each one of them individually. And at some point, I'm going to bring all 4 of them up and double check the overall level to make sure that everything is playing back seamlessly and not overloading the master. So flatten all these out here. We want to make sure that the sum of all 4 of these does not overload the master when playing together. So, as you can see here, we have 4 cues. They are set up to start at the same time and end at the same time so that they can loop together. Looks like these are all the same length over here. Looks like these action cues are shorter than the ambient, so we want to make sure that they are the same length. So they loop together, or else they'll cut off when these are done playing. Looks like they're set up to loop. No gaps. No silence at the end of the files or the beginning of the files. One of the biggest issues that can happen with this type of composition is when you have 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of the cues playing is clashing notes or clashing rhythms. You want to make sure everything is in the same key and following the same progression so that they are not hitting all sorts of crazy intervals and creating dissonance between the different instrument layers. You want to make sure it's in the same tempo and in the same time signature so that it rhythmically does not clash. You can certainly work with double time and half time to make sure that you have and keep everything rhythmically in sync. So we will listen for any clashing notes, any clashing rhythms. We will also listen for differences in intensity. The ambient cue will always be playing all throughout the game. And so the buzzer and mech and spider cues will come into the mix and start playing when one of those particular robots attacks. And this happens when either one of the robots is alerted, or they take some damage, or the player takes damage, and the battle goes on until somebody loses all their health points and is defeated. And then the music will fade back down to silence, and you'll continue to hear the ambient loop all the way through the mix. So the ambient cue will probably outline a bit of the progression, will kind of foreshadow what's to come, but you shouldn't have too much strong instrumentation or repeating melodic lines or phrases, anything too strong, because you want to make sure that the action cue comes through even bigger and stronger than the ambient cue. You want to increase the intensity, you want to increase the level of action, the power and the energy in the mix. So each action cue will add a couple of layers of instrumentation. We'll certainly add percussion. That's going to create the strongest intensity difference. It will also probably include some thematic instrument or idea, or some melodic phrase that can represent whatever the robot that is attacking. Hold on just a moment. All right, so each layer needs to have its own unique instrumentation so that the player should be able to identify which robot is coming after them, even if they're coming from off screen. So we'll take a listen to each one of the ambient and action cues, and then we'll jump over to the stingers. The stingers are meant to have a strong impact and fade quickly to silence. This is the kind of correct shape for these types of files. They'll hit really hard and then make sure they fade to silence very quickly. Let's see, these two look pretty good, actually. Well, the middle one here looks kind of short, but it looks like it's the correct waveform. This one looks almost correct, it just gets cut off at the end. This one just looks like a constant tone all the way across that eventually gets cut off. So you want to make sure that they have a strong impact and then fade to silence very quickly. These look like they are also the correct shape. So that's kind of an overview of some of the things that we are listening for. We'll go through, listen to each one of them, and then listen to them as a whole. Just want to make sure that I can read these on the correct faders. All right, so let's start out here with the first ambient cue. Let's do this. Let's start at the beginning. All right, so we have a couple of synths that feel very low pass. So you got the hi-hat in there, you got the lead line. Would like to, once the instrumentation here has been established, I would like to maybe hear some changes over the course, the progression changes. It's definitely kind of foreshadowing what's to come, but maybe a bit of change. Okay, the hi-hat stopped. So maybe the filter opens up, or another instrument layer comes in and out of the mix. Let's bring in the buzzer cue. synths and got the drums in there. Maybe use another instrument added in, maybe a little bit more percussion to bring up the energy level. Let's see what happens here with the spider cue. Alright, so all the layers are working well. You've got everything keeping in sync, playing together. This one adds a little bit more intensity with the stabs, and more percussion. And the mech, here, let's do this. Let's take out the previous layers. Let's just bring in the mech. Like the guitar, it's a little repetitive. Would like to hear a little bit more change through there. Well, that works. The drums help bring up some intensity also. Watch out for the level difference between the mech and the ambient cue and the buzzer cue. When the mech's playing, it's kind of difficult to hear some of the other changes come in. Right, so the buzzer really loses some of its intensity next to the mech cue. So I would probably bring up the intensity of the buzzer a little bit more, and even the spider a bit more. So everything works together very well. Everything fits. Watch out for the overall levels. It's peaking, and I think it's probably with the addition of the mech cue. Let's see if we can take this out. I like the brass line in there. Yeah, if you take out the mech, all three of these work well. It's just kind of brushing up against zero. Maybe it goes over, but so it's really balancing. The buzzer's too low, the mech's too high, so it's kind of balancing them all together. All right, so good ideas, good things, good layers to work with when you bring it all together. It certainly sounds like a full mix. So maybe, yeah, like I said, just a little bit more volume, instruments, intensity from the buzzer, and less volume. I like where the instruments and the intensity is at in the mech. Maybe work with some of the double time with the percussion. That always helps bringing up the energy level. Let's take a listen to the three stingers. Come on, Logic. There you go. Nope. Well, come here. There they go. First stinger. No stinger. How about that? Try again. Cool. Strong hit, cymbal crash. Yeah, they all work. They all should cut through the mix. The second and the third one sound closer to each other. I do like what's happening in the first one, though. So, those should work well. We'll definitely you'll get a sense of how they all work together once you get them into the game. That is certainly another step in the process here, is you compose everything, you make it work in the DAW, and then we'll take some time this week to make sure everything is set up and working in the game using Wise, and you get another kind of insight or peek into how everything will sound, and that should probably inspire some changes that might need to happen. Right, next one here, we will start with our ambient cue. Alright, so we got a strong line from the piano. Alright, I'm going to bring in some of the other layers. Start with the buzzer cue to see how that works against this piano. Withhold comment until I hear all the layers. I want to see how it all fits together. I'm going to bring in the spider cue. Mech cue. So, I was looking for a little bit more power from some of the action cues, and the reason I went through and listened to all of them first is to see kind of how the puzzle fit together. I might watch out for the strong melodic line in the piano. Even though it's not like a strong instrument, it's very present, and it's very memorable, and by being in the ambient cue, it will be playing consistently throughout and repeating over and over again, and this would be good as a kind of thematic line for one of the robots, probably on another instrument other than the piano. And then the other thing I was listening for was the percussion, like how big did the percussion get? Because here in the ambient cue and even in the buzzer cue, the percussion is very kind of glitched and light, and here it almost, you can get a hint of the rhythm overall, but you kind of start losing the pattern and the rhythm of it. So I was thinking, okay, well that's the ambient then, so was expecting more power coming from the action cues. So coming to this buzzer. Now you have a strong synth and lead line, but I'm still kind of missing the percussive power. There's a kick drum in there. So maybe a bit more volume from the kick and the pattern in the buzzer cue. Then you have stronger instrumentation and just kind of overall louder in the spider cue. So this one works pretty well. The patterns start kind of getting a little bit loose when you start playing against multiples of these cues. There's a kind of a triplet in there. So then the mech comes in. And I would expect more instrumentation and more power from this cue. The voice works very well, but a strong kick snare or timpani and snare drum, something more percussive to create more power from these enemies. I think the spider actually has the most rhythmic strength to it. So everything fits together, it all loops together. The choir seems to cut out towards the end of the mech cue. So watch the loop through that cue. And then everything kind of feels like it starts over when it does. So you want to make it more consistent with the instrumentation. Whatever instrumentation you start with also has to be present at the end so that it seems seamless when it loops around. All right, so good instrumentation. I think it fits well with the cue or with the game. I would probably just go for more percussion and more power through the mix. Stingers. Yeah, make sure you have a strong impact on the front. That's probably going to be too low in the mix. I mean, what you probably could do is something like this. Just kind of layer these together because each one of these kind of has some of the elements that you need. Let's do something here. If you did this, put this in front, because you have the low hit, and then you have the cymbal crash, and then you have some interesting kind of synth tone at the top. And if I just put a fade on it. And then throw that into a whole bunch of reverb, add some more effects on it. But that kind of thing, where you have a strong impact, an interesting tone that fades out to silence, typically drenching it in reverb helps make it sound interesting, or adding distortion or filter sweep or flanger, phaser, that kind of stuff. All right, so for this one, I'm going to, let's listen to the ambient cue first. I could probably get rid of these. So I don't have any extra faders. And then just listen to the ambient cue. Very cool. Strong progression. See where it goes here. Cool. And then check the loop. All right, so definitely want to cut this down so that everything loops seamlessly. One issue would be maybe the power and strength of this cue. You could probably pull some of this instrumentation into some of the other cues, especially just looking at the waveform. The ambient cue seems to be much stronger, a lot more instrumentation. So you're going to want to extend all of these action cues to the same length. Can I drag it out? Oh. Change? Oh, okay. There's my, there it goes. So maybe you can do something like this. Actually, that's probably, I mean, you don't want to do that. But to listen to it, we can do something like this so that we can hear how everything will work together. But you're going to want to develop these ideas with strong thematic lines like you have in the ambient cue. You could probably take this strong line and some of this percussion and move it off to some of these other cues. So let's hear buzzer action. Yeah, you're going to want to avoid the repetition in each one of these cues. And more volume in each one of the bounces. So, yeah, you're going to want to take the instrumentation from the ambient cue and incorporate it into some of these other cues. Let's see if these all work together. Take some of the percussion for each one of them. Add a strong line like you've done in these later on in the ambient cue here. Oh, where'd it go? And just make sure that each one of the buzzer, mech, and spider has its own thematic line like that. By having everything in the ambient cue, it's going to not give you much room to go upwards in or up in dynamics and intensity. So think about rearranging where the instruments fall and how each one of these action cues develops. Let's do 3 stingers. Here's the first one. Ooh, some low end. Let's try that again. Okay, strong hit. Cool. Watch out for any fade ins. That was very short, so that should be just fine. All right, very cool. They hit sharply and then get out of the way very quickly, fade off to silence. So those should be able to be heard. A couple of different things to point out. Good stuff to listen to overall. There is certainly a reason why this is our second project of the month. It is a bit more challenging overall in the composition. If you have any questions in the compositional approach, please let me know. I can help you out with any sort of aspect of the development of this project. But like I said, this week we will get into taking your music and sound effects and using the Wise application to actually get them up and working. So please reach out if you have any sort of technical issues, or if you have any creative ideas that you want to run by me and want to figure out a way of how to set them up. But right now we're going to switch over to the archive, which will have a discussion on the new assignments for week 3. Thank you. Switch from the week 2 assignments into the new week 3 assignments. And I want to go over just a few of the aspects of how to set up your Wise session, how to use Wise, of course, and how to import your music and your sound effects and get them working in the game. There's a couple of things that will you want to make sure that you start from the very beginning to make sure that this is all going to work correctly for you. And the first one is to make sure that you have the proper version of Wise set up and installed. So for this month, we are using the Wise version 2016, and my version will load up here on this end in just a sec. Make sure you have the correct version of Wise installed. If not, you would go back to the Audio Kinetic webpage and install the correct version, which looks like this. Hold on just a sec. Come here. Come here, webpage. You would go to Audio Kinetic's web page and download Wise over here. This is going to download the Wise launcher, which looks like this, the Wise launcher. And in here, you want to make sure that you've gone to Wise. I'll do this later. You go to Wise, and you want to make sure that the version's installed. One of them says 2016 on it. If not, then you can do install new versions and make sure you have a 2016 version installed. It shouldn't matter which one you do, but just go for the most recent one, the biggest number, right? Which at the time of filming is 2016.2.6.6153. Just get the newest one and install that, and when you launch, it will look something like this. So, now, first and foremost, you need to have the correct version of Wise installed, and there's more detailed instructions on FSO to get that installed. The next thing would be to have a couple of files set up on your desktop to make this project work. So what we are going to do is we'll go to FSO here, and show you all of the files that you have to download. So let me find that real quick. I am going to go, let me get to the correct class first. All right, so here we are in week 3. You should download everything, go through and watch the WISE overview video that is an overview of WISE. It leads you through windows and menus and the overall structure of your files. And you'll download also the 2D platformer WISE setup and AngryBots WISE setup. We'll be talking about that next week, or not next week, on our next session, and our chiptune composition, which I'll also talk about today. So let's start out here with our 2D platformer WISE setup. In here, there's a video that will recreate a lot of what I'm saying here. So there's a bit more detailed information there. And there's also all of the downloads for the assignment. There's a PDF that also follows along step by step with all of this process. You can download the video from above, but make sure you download this 2D platformer WISE zip file. This is the session that we will be using. So make sure you have a copy of that downloaded. You're also going to need a copy of the game, which you should already have downloaded. But if you need to find, again, a copy of the game, you can go back to week 1, where we started 2D platformer. Go to the game composition assignment and re-download this zip file. That's where the copy of the game is. So let's go ahead and set up a couple of things that we need to. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a folder. I'm going to do this all on my desktop, and I recommend that you do the same while you are working on the project so that all of the files are easily accessible. I'm going to name this 2D platformer. And in this folder, I'm going to take that zip file that we just downloaded from FSO. I'm going to unzip it. I don't need the zip file after that. So I'll just take that folder. This is the WISE project that is provided. This is what we're going to use with all of the files that we need. So we'll just start with a copy of that. Then we're going to get a copy of the game, as I mentioned before. Go into your downloaded version of the game application and make sure that these two files are next to each other. This is extremely important to make sure that this works properly. If the 2D platformer file is not there, right next to this 2D platformer WISE folder, it will not work, which is also stated here on FSO. In the assignments, if these two files, warning, make sure you have these two files next to each other or things will not work, right? So make sure if you are having any sort of issues at the end of this process, make sure that you have everything set up correctly. It will solve a lot of any sort of troubleshooting you might encounter. All right, the other thing we're going to do is create a folder called Media. And in this Media folder, I'm going to create another folder called Music. If I can spell it right, Music. And I'll create another one called Sound Effects. And this is, I'm going to put all of my music and sound effects in here that I created, just so I can have quick and easy access to those. So let me do that real quick. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my original composition files and a copy of my sound effects. and bring them in there, which looks like this. So I'm going to go get all of my music files. I'm going to take a copy of those. Let's try that again. Drop my music in my music folder. I'm going to back up, go find all of my sound effects. Should have 18 sound effects. And I'm going to make a copy and put that in my sound effects folder. And this is for no reason other than to have very quick, easy access to all the files that I need. All right, at this point, I can launch Wise and make sure I open up the project to get started somewhere. It would load up. Should just be patient here. And we are going to navigate to the project that we need. You probably don't have this project right here. Your recent projects is probably blank. And we just need to hit Open Other and then navigate to that project, which is on your desktop. It's called 2D Platformer. You're going to go to 2D Platformer Wise. And then you're going to find this 2D Platformer Wise project, the wproj file. This is the session. Double-click that, and Wise will load it up. It provides you with all of the setup that you need to get started on the project. So we are going to start out by working on the music. We're going to get that set up. And then we are also going to set up the sound effects. And I will kind of go through it at a quicker pace here. It is explained in a bit more detail in the other videos, but I do want to kind of show an overview of how this is going to work. All right, so we have different layouts that we'll be using. We'll mostly be alternating between the designer layout and the interactive music layout. And I'm also going to be spending time switching between the audio tab, the events tab, and the sound banks tab. So audio is where all of my audio is going to go. I'm going to import all of my WAV files here. I'm going to set them up and make them work appropriately for the game. Audio is added to events. And events are the messages that are sent from the game into Wise. The game has no idea about your music or your sound effects, has no idea about the audio. All it knows is that if it calls out these commands or these messages, that Wise will respond and play the correct audio file. So all we're going to have control over is when the music begins and when it ends. And this will create all of the interactivity that we need for our music. And then whenever we need a particular sound effect in the game just calls one of these events and it plays the corresponding sound. We'll have to set that up, but that is our overall approach with our events. So audio is attached to events, and both audio and events end up in sound banks. Sound banks are one of the final formats that is used by the game itself. When you are done with your session, you do not bounce a file like you do in a DAW. You create your entire composition and you bounce out the final version. Here in Wise, you are going to build the project. And when you build the project, it creates a couple of files that the game can use to actually play back while somebody is playing the game. When you go to sell and distribute your game, you do not want to have a whole bunch of loose WAV files sitting on the game disk that everybody can steal and change and have access to copyrighted material. So instead, these sound banks will encrypt the files. It will take all of your WAV files, all of the data that you put into Wise, and encrypt it in something. It's not really a zip file, but it can kind of sort of be thought of as a zip file, where it's a file that contains a whole bunch of other files that is encrypted and compressed, and also is set up to work on multiple different platforms. So Wise speaks the language of a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation, a Sony PlayStation, or a Microsoft Xbox, or an iOS or an Android device. It speaks all of these different languages, and the sound bank converts all of the files and is the file that the game actually uses. So this is just a quick overview of the types of files we'll be interacting with. So I'm going to start out by creating the music system, setting up the music to work properly in the game. We have two events, when the music begins and when the music ends. So already set up in the game, when the game starts, it calls out this command or this event called play music begin. So when the game starts, this is what we want to do with your music. You have 3 intro files. The game is going to randomly choose one of them. It's going to play that file. Then when it's done, it's going to transition into the main loops. Then there are 3 main loops. It is going to randomly choose a main loop file and play it all the way through until it's done. Then it plays the next main loop file. Randomly chooses another one, plays all the way through that, and then it'll randomly choose another one, and keep doing that forever until the game is over. When the game is over, when you when you lose all of your health. The game is over when the character falls off the level, kind of falls into the sludge down below. When the game is over, musically, we want any music that was playing, we want that to stop. And then when it does, then we're going to play one of the 3 ending cues. Randomly choose an ending and play it. And then it will play it once, it'll stop, and then the whole game will start all over again. So that's a general setup of our music. We start out in the audio tab here, and we are going to drag our music to drag our music to this default work unit in the interactive music hierarchy. We have a master mixer hierarchy, we have an actor mixer hierarchy, we have an interactive music hierarchy. I think these are long, drawn-out ways of saying something pretty simple. The master mixer hierarchy is all of our buses. This is our master output bus. If we had a dialogue bus, a music bus, a sound effects bus, if we had different groups of sounds or instruments or music together, this will contain all of our buses to organize it. Actor mixer is all of the sound effects. When we set up all of our sound effects, we're going to drag the WAV files here. And we are going to set them up appropriately. The interactive music hierarchy is for the music. So basically we have buses, sound effects, and music. Each one of these has something called a default work unit. And we actually will not be using these default work units except for to basically organize our files. We are not, the basics of a default work unit allows multiple people to work on the same session at the same time or at different times. So a default work unit is a unit of work. It's some files, it's some process that you want to do, and you are going to take that work, move it over to your computer, work in your session, and then bring it back into the main session. Since everybody is working on their own individual projects, we're really not using these to their full potential, and it's not necessary. But if you were working on a large team, it allows you to separate the work that's done by everybody and still bring it back together in a session that makes sense. All right, so we're going to start out with our music. I'm going to go back to the folder where we created and imported all the files that we needed, or kind of organized all the files we needed. I'm going to go to my music here, and I'm going to drag these into the interactive music hierarchy. and I am going to drop them right on the default work unit here. So I dragged all of these files down here right on top of this default work unit. And this audio file importer window pops up. Right now, the default is perfectly fine, and we can hit import at this point. There's a lot of settings that you could set up here if you had specific uses for the files, but the defaults will work just fine. We can hit import. It's going to import all of our files. We now see our music endings, our intros, and our loops in Wise. And we need to set up a way for these files to play back together. Right now, they're just individual, so we need to group them together in certain ways so that they play back correctly in the game. If you were going to load up a whole bunch of music for a party and you put it into iTunes or your favorite music player and you wanted to sequence them to play in a certain order, you would put them in a playlist. Playlist is a very common term for kind of sequencing music together, and we are going to do the same thing here. We are going to put our intros and our main loops together in a playlist so that when the game starts, it's going to play back these files correctly. I can highlight all of these files, and then I can put them together in a playlist. Let's see here. Can I widen this out? Show me all the buttons. Let's see. There we go. Sorry. Before I highlight all of these, I'm going to click on the default work unit up here, and this button right here in the middle says Create New Playlist Music Playlist Container. This is the icon that we're going to use to create that container. Everything in Wise is a container. Well, not everything, but containers contain other files. That's mainly the approach that they're going for with that terminology. But if we want to now highlight all of these intros and main loops, we can drag them into the playlist container. And we're going to rename this. I can either rename it over here. I can right-click and choose Rename. And I'm going to call this Music Playlist, no, Music, sorry, Begin _ Playlist. All right, so a playlist allows us to sequence our files together. We have these files set up. I'm going to create another playlist. I'm going to click back on my default work unit, and I'm going to click this icon for another playlist, and I'm going to call this Music End _ Playlist. I'm going to drag all of my endings here. And now, this kind of organizes them together, but it doesn't actually set up any sort of order or sequence for these playlists. And that is done in the interactive music layout. If I go to the Layouts menu, I choose Interactive Music, and it gives, the windows change a little bit, and I need to go down here. This portion is called the Music Playlist Editor. So if I click on Playlists, I can see the appropriate order of all the files. So I'm going to start out up here, Music Begin Playlist. It's empty right now, so I'm going to drag in all of these intro files one at a time. Unfortunately, you cannot select and highlight multiple files at the same time and drag them in. Just click on each one of them, drag it into the playlist. If you accidentally click off of the playlist, you'll see these waveforms. If somehow you get lost in here, you see these waveforms, always click back on the playlist. We'll get you back to the playlist editor. This is one of the more tedious and difficult aspects of making this work, is just kind of navigating around. Make sure you always select back to the playlist, and you can have your 3 intros and your main loops playing here. All right. Now, this playlist says sequence continuous. That means it's going to play these in a sequence continuously. It's going to start at intro 1, and then it's going to play intro 2, then intro 3, then main loop 1, 2, and 3, which is not at all what we want to do. So let's start here. All right, so it plays them in order, which is, like I said, not at all what we want. We want of the 3 intros, we want one of them to be chosen once, and then it's going to move into the main loops, and we want it to then randomly choose main loops infinitely, and just do it over and over again. So we need to group these files together. We have the intro group and the main loop group. I am going to click on my sequence continuous segment up here, or yeah, I guess would be a group. I'm going to create new groups. Sometimes if it puts a group inside of another group, you can just kind of drag them out of each other. You want to make sure that each of the groups are on the same level. So we're going to drag these 3 intros in here. Intro 1, 2, and 3. Oops, I missed. All right, there's intro 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to go main loop 1, 2, and 3. All right, so this still doesn't solve anything because, again, sequence continuous plays them in a sequence continuously. It's going to go from the first one down into the first group here. It's going to play 1, 2, and 3, down to the second group, a main loop 1, 2, and 3, and then be done. So we have a couple of different options here. We have sequence continuous, sequence step, random continuous, and random step. So we have sequence, the words sequence and random, and continuous and step. Sequence means it plays them in order. Random means it plays them in a random order. Continuous means that when the first one is done, it'll play the next one. Step means that you have to hit play each time, or you have to trigger the event each time for it to move forward. It will randomly set something up or play it in sequence, but it has to be poked each time to make it work. So in this case, the top layer needs to be sequence continuous because once it goes from this, we want it to go down to here. But when it goes into the intro group, we want it to randomly choose it, but we only want that to happen once. So we're going to choose that to random step. So it's going to randomly fire one of these off and play it one time, and then it's going to go down to the next one. This one we're also going to set to random step. So it's going to come down to this one, play, randomly choose one of them, and only play it one time, though, which is not what we want for the main loops because we want that to go on infinitely. So there's this other column over here called loop count. It says how many times do you want it to do that thing. And for the main loops, you want it to do it infinitely. If you hit the down arrow on this second main loop group, you can switch it to infinite, and it will play through this section. It will randomly choose one of them, fall out, but come back through this loop infinitely for as long as the game is being played. So let's try this out. If I click this main music begin playlist and hit play, it's going to randomly choose an intro, but only do that once, and then jump down into the main loops and hopefully do this infinitely. So it is switching, and it's doing exactly what we wanted it to. So random step will work for each one of your groups, and you want to set the music to be infinite. If it only plays one time and stops, we want to make sure that we want to set it to play infinitely. All right. So this is how this playlist should work. Let's go to our music end playlist. This is going to be really simple. We're just going to drag all three of our endings in here and set it to random step so that it just does this once. Randomly chooses an ending, plays it, and then it's over. The game will start over again, and all of the music will start again. All right, so this is how the audio is set up, but this doesn't set up the events. Once we have the WAV files controlling as we want them, I'm just going to go to Project here. I'm going to do Project Save. We should have probably done that a while ago, but save. Also notice that it's not Command S, it is Control S to save properly in 2D platformer. For reasons that the application kind of thinks it's a Windows application, but it's just wrapped and running on Mac. So I just typically just go hit File Save to be sure. All right, now we have set up our audio. Now it's time to move on to the events. We have two events. We have music begin and music end. So setting up the music begin should be pretty straightforward. All we need to do is to play this music begin playlist. So let me take a step back here. Events have actions. There's anytime you click on one of these events over here, you're going to get access to these double arrows, and you have different actions like play, break, which will allow you to kind of pause and move on to the next thing. Post event, which will allow you to trigger any other events. You can stop, you can pause, you can mute, you can change a bus volume, you can change an individual audio file's voice volume, you can change the voice pitch, you can add a low pass filter, a high pass filter, you can change mix states, you can turn on and off switches, change game parameters. There's a lot of different things that you can do from these events. Remember, these are the messages that are sent from the game. The game knows nothing about your audio file. It just calls out these different events, and Wise takes care of the rest. So for this music begin playlist, we want to play something, and then we hit browse. When you hit browse, it may look like this, it maybe looks like this, and it's kind of grayed out, doesn't look like there's anything to choose. But if you go to the, let's see here, where is it hidden? What did I do here? I do play, browse, I go to the actor mixer hierarchy, and, oh sorry, the interactive music hierarchy. I'm in my music. And I want to play this music begin playlist. Once I hit OK, well actually, you want to play the music begin playlist. You do not want to play any of the individual files, or it'll just play that one file. You set up all the interactivity in the playlist, so make sure you trigger that. At this point, if I hit play, it will play that event. Notice it says play music begin down here in the transport, so you know which event you're playing. And it starts playing that playlist. And it gets to the part where it randomizes, and it will do that infinitely. So next is the end playlist. The end event. The first thing we want to do is we want to stop the music begin playlist. Anything that was playing, no matter where you were, when the game is over, you're going to turn it off. So we have the play event. We also have a stop event. We want to stop just this one file. We don't want to stop everything. You could stop all of the audio in the game if you wanted to. Probably wouldn't be a very good idea right now. But we hit stop, and we want to stop that music begin playlist. That will cut off the previous music. Now we want to play. And we'll hit browse again, and we want to play the ending. Oops, let me try that again. Hit browse. We want to play the ending cue. All right, so when the game is over, it's going to call out play music end. That's going to stop the music that was playing and play just one of the random files in the end playlist. All right. So that should set up our music. Let's hit play. Let's hit begin. Let's go over to the ending. And it should stop, end there, and be done. All right. So I'm going to go back to Project Save. Now that I have my music set up, I am going to go back to the Audio tab, and now I'm going to tackle the sound effects. These should be pretty straightforward. Most of it is just you have the events. Again, the events are really important. It tells you all of the files or all of the messages that the game can speak, all of the messages that it can send you, and you basically need to respond with audio. And you'll see these match the sound effects. Bomb boom, bomb fuse, bomb pickup, bomb set down, enemy death, gunshot, health pickup, jump, ouch, and taunt. So we need to set up these events. We need to start over in the audio tab. We are going to work on the actor mixer hierarchy now on this default work unit. This is for the sound effects. I'm going to go back over to my sound effects over here. And I'm just going to highlight all of my WAV files. Again, this is why we kind of organized it all together so you have quick access. Highlight all of my WAV files and drag them into my actor mixer hierarchy. You want to make sure you go on that default work unit right here. Make sure you drag onto that. And once you do, then you can see this audio file importer screen. Again, all of the files should be just fine, so we're going to hit import. I'll just go to Project Save. And now I have all of my WAV files. They'll start out blue. Blue audio files mean that they have not been converted yet into the format that is necessary for the game. This will happen when you build the sound bank. One of the things the sound bank does is compresses all the files, convert them, change them into any formats that are necessary. But for the time being, it should work just fine that they are blue, but throws some people off when they see the different color there. So most of these are fine. If I just go ahead and play a sound, we hear the sounds being played.
Bums away.
So one thing we need to do are for these files that have multiple different versions. Enemy death 1, 2, and 3. Jump 1, 2, and 3. Ouch 1, 2, and 3. And taunt 1, 2, and 3. We want them in a single event, or each one of them has their own kind of single event. We don't want the 3 files to be played at the same time, so we want to randomize them. So I'm going to click on this default work unit again. And up here, this icon that looks like all the little dots at the top, this is called a random container. And a random container allows you to randomize files. Anytime it asks, it's just going to randomly feed it a file. So we're going to create a couple of these, and I'm going to name them SFX enemy death. Probably don't need to capitalize everything. Then I'm going to create another one. Each time I'm going to click on the default work unit. I'm going to click this icon here to create another random container. And I'll just create a couple of them, so I don't have to keep going back. All right, the next one, I am going to go SFX, and I'm going to name this jump. I'll just right click this time and do rename. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. This time I'm going to call it SFX ouch. And the last one here is SFX taunt. There we go. So I'm going to take all of my enemy death files. I'm going to drag them into enemy death. I'm going to take all of my ouch files and drag them into ouch. I'm going to take all of my taunt files and drag them into taunt. Going to take all of my jump files and drag them into jump. All right. So this should get all of our audio files set up for the game. I'm just going to, again, go back to Project Save. Now all we need to do is set up the events, which should always, each one of these should be real simple to do. So all we need to do is go ahead. We are going to play a file. we can hit Browse. And this time I'm going to go up here to my actor mixer hierarchy. This is Bomb Boom, so I'm going to choose Bomb Boom. You don't even go to the next one. You don't even have to hit play in this. It'll just do it automatically. If you hit Browse, this is Bomb Fuse, so I'll set that one up. This is Bomb Pickup. I'll hit Browse, and I'll choose Pickup. I'll go to Set Down, hit Browse, choose Set Down, go to Enemy Death, hit Browse. This time I want to make sure I choose the random container. Do not choose the individual files. You want to use the random container itself. So I'll set that one up. There's Enemy Death. Here's Gunshot. Browse. Gunshot. Health Pickup. Browse. Health Pickup. Jump. Again, I've selected the Jump random container. Ouch. Select Ouch random container. Taunt. Select Taunt random container. All right. Now I have messages. Seem to work. All right. At this point, I am ready to go. I can build the game, or I can build the project and test it out in the game to make sure everything is playing back properly. And this is done by going to the Layouts menu again, and we're going to choose Sound Bank. And over here in the Sound Bank, you'll notice that there's one Sound Bank here called Sound Bank. It is set up for the Mac platform, and the English is set to, the language is set to English. So we're ready to go. All we should have to do at this point is hit Generate. And when you hit Generate, this message will pop up, and it says Evaluation Mode. Sound banks contain 27 media items out of 200. It gives you this generic message, and it should have built all of the files correctly. The way you can test this out is you go out of Wise, and you go to this game application that we brought into this folder. Now, when early on, we made sure that this application is next to this folder so that when you hit Generate, it actually backs out of all of this 2D Platformer Wise folder and knows to go into here. And then let me show you the location that it drops the files. If we do Show Package Contents, we can actually get a folder structure of this application. Go to Apps, go to Contents. Resources. Now you don't actually have to do this, but it'll show you what's going on here. In Resources, we'll go to Data. In Data, we'll go to Streaming Assets. In Streaming Assets, we will go to Audio. We'll go to Generated Sound Banks and the Mac folder. And right here, today, at the current time, it shows that we have created this file. The setup that we have done in Wise is now going to play back in the game. So now let me back out of all of this, and you can now run the game application and hear your music and sound effects play. There is a little bit more information about how to appropriately mix and how to adjust levels. I'll leave that up for the video game. Well, you have to do it for the video game. I'll leave that up for the video. To explain a bit more detail, but that should get you up and running and make things work properly for the game. Again, if you reach this point and you are in Wise and you have generated here and the message that pops up is in red and it gives you all sorts of errors, read the errors, make sure that you're not missing a file. Sometimes it's complaining about the setup inside of Wise. Or other times, if you go try to play the music and you don't hear anything, it would be the fact that this 2D Platformer application and the 2D Platformer Wise folders were not next to each other when you built. So double check that. Or if you have any other issues, please get in contact with us and your instructor can help you out. So, what else? Let me go back to here. Um, that's the overall approach for 2D platformer. And on Thursday, we'll talk a bit more on Angry Bots. I'll point out a few more interesting approaches for how Angry Bots will be set up in Wise. Please work on these projects throughout the week so that we can answer any questions before the weekend. Don't leave it to Sunday night in case any sort of issues come about. And the last project I want to discuss here is your chiptune composition. It's not entirely wise. We do have a composition this week. We will listen in peer review next week for anybody that submits. But this is a composition in the style of the original Nintendo platform. It is a traditional linear composition. It doesn't have to loop. It's not interactive in any sort of way. The composition itself is 1 minute to 2 minutes long. And I'm most interested that you are following the restrictions of the original Nintendo system to kind of get a sense of what composition was like back in these earlier systems overall. And so with this project, I was a bit hesitant at first when we started this, thinking that it would end in less than optimal compositions, less than listenable music because of the limitations of the sounds. The sounds don't really sound all that great or aren't as interesting or complex compared to modern synths and DAWs. But what I ended up finding is that most people end up having your focus on the composition a whole lot more, and you're not hiding behind kind of the production and the sounds and things like arpeggiators and drum machines that will do it all for you. And so there's a strong focus on the composition and the development of the music. So again, there is about a minute-long composition. When you download the project, you get a session that a Logic session that provides all of the sounds that you are going to be using for this composition, for this project. So some of the main restrictions are, number one, you have to use the sounds that are provided with the project. Those come in the form of EXS24 sound banks. If you click on any one of these tracks, they are all equipped with EXS24, and you have a couple of presets that were sampled directly from the original Nintendo and Famicom systems. And so these are very simple, straightforward effects. They're not all that wonderful sounding, but they are very musical, very melodic, and so you might spend more time at a faster pace or with staccato instrumentation so that you don't stick too long on holding a chord, so that there's a lot more movement and energy to the mix. So let's see here. Can I even get something going? So provided are a couple of chiptune sound banks. Let's see here, like drums and basic tones and synths. So you have to use the sounds that are provided by for the project. You are limited to only 4 simultaneous instruments playing at the same time. You can use more than 4 tracks. You just can't have more than 4 playing at any one time. So you can have as many as you want. Four. That means one of them has to be a drums, one of them has to be melody. You need drums and melody at some point in the composition. The other 2, you could have drums, bass, harmony, melody. You could have drums, harmony, melody, melody, or like drums, harmony, melody, counter melody, or drums, melody, melody, melody. Depends on how you want to approach it. but you can have any combination as long as you have drums and a melodic idea. Of course, the progression, the melody all need to develop over the course of the minute or so composition. You can have more than 4 tracks. You just need to make sure that they are, there's only 4 of them playing at any one time. What else? So you have to use the sounds. You're limited to the number of tracks. You have to have drums. You have to have melody. Oh, the melody has to change at some point. In order to do that, you're probably best to duplicate a track. And let's see, track. Well, let me just do it this way. I'm thinking too hard. So duplicate the track. And then use another sound for your lead melody, but only 4 of them playing at any one time. So I have a couple of student submissions. These are some of the better ones that I've had, but it shows you the capability of what is possible. So here is the first one. Let's do it this way. Hold on, I want to make sure I have a volume control. One moment. All right, so this one really shows why faster, more staccato movements and a faster pace overall works very well to maintain energy from the cues, or maintain energy through the piece. Especially this part right here. So faster arpeggiated parts, like arpeggios moving through the chord changes, work well to outline and give a lot of material to pull from. Here's the next one. Let's see, let's try this. So good energy, lots of changes also throughout. Big sweeps through chords. Having things on the quarter note, eighth notes, 32nd, or 16th and 32nd gives a lot of room for all these changes. So, and each one of these is only 4 tracks playing at any one time. They're just constantly switching their sounds back and forth. All right, and one more. And there's just a whole lot of movement in here. Again, these are kind of really classic chiptune approaches where you're repeating the notes or doing quick sweeps through arpeggios. right, so a lot of activity, a lot of great ideas through each one of those. Certainly, those are the top end of the spectrum of the overall quality, but hopefully gives you some inspiration about where these might go. All right, so that is all of the different aspects we wanted to talk about. We wanted to go over the week 2 submissions. Good job for everybody that did submit from the Angry Bots composition. And hopefully it inspires more people to submit for our chiptune peer review that we will do next week. And we talked about the 2D platformer assignment and the chiptune assignment. We'll dive into the Angry Bots later on this week. All right, so please let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, we'll keep moving forward. We'll get into next week and talk about wrapping everything up for the month. So, all right, let me know if you have any questions. And other than that, have a good day. Thanks.